All right, everyone. Thank you very much for joining us tonight here on the Georgia Game Developers live stream. Tonight we're focusing on 2D animation for Unity. I want to thank all our Patreons for supporting this channel. Jennifer, Stephen Coffey, James Simpson, Ron Jones the artist, and more. We appreciate all your support. Upcoming streams, we'll have a lot more streams next week. And remember to check out the Georgia Livestreamers Network. Check out www.ggda.org for all the links to all the various live streamers and podcasters within the network. If you haven't already checked out the first of James's videos focusing on 3D animation, it is live on our YouTube channel. So go ahead and see it there. And with that said, it is my pleasure to now turn this over to Dr. Unity himself, James Simpson.
Thank you, Andrew. How you doing? How you doing, man?
Doing well.
Okay. Okay, so last week we just been talking about animations in 3D, and one of the questions was brought up, so how about you do that in 2D? It says, okay, well, I'll throw something together. So I went ahead and started with another project. As I mentioned before, I start with, I always use the LTS version. In this case, I'm creating a 3D project calling it GGDA Animation 2D. So I'm going to go ahead and create this. And then Unity on my other screen is importing and all that other fun stuff. One of the things that you're going to need to have is some sprites, because we're dealing with 2D. Everything is essentially, think of it as either sprites or planes that are being rendered on the screen. I just normally create things in 3D. You could also use 2D when you build it. It's not hard to switch it over. So here we go. So I got it all up and running right now, and what I did was I went to the asset store, and I said, okay, I wanted to find something to some kind of animations to show. My son was like, won't you grab Mario? And I'm like, I don't think so. So I decided to look for 2D characters, and I found some nice little options in here. There was a whole lot of options here, and I tell people all the time, the asset store is a wonderful thing, and I can't recommend it highly enough, especially if you're not artistically inclined. So I went ahead and I purchased something called Cat Thief Girl 2, and I went ahead and import this. Now this already has the animations in here, which is fine. But I'm going to take it from scratch and going to go ahead and build it up without using their existing stuff, only their graphics. Because it looked pretty good, and I thought Cat Thief Girl would be something to look at. Normally when I play Dungeons & Dragons, I play a rogue character, so I thought it fit me well. So let's go ahead and we're going to open up Cat Thief Girl, and we're going to open up the sprites. So they have background, death, flinch, idle, jump, run, shoot, splash, spin, and walk. When you're developing these animations, you always want to start with the basic animation that everyone's going to see when your program starts up. In this case, it's going to be idle. So what I'm going to do here is I'm going to go to Window, I'm going to go to Animation, and I'm going to go to Animation again. I'm going to go ahead and dock this down here. Right now, it'll say no animatable objects selected, which is true. We haven't done anything except open a window. In my hierarchy, I'm going to right-click, say Create an Empty. I'm going to confirm that my position, rotation, scale is at 0. If not, I can click the cog symbol and say Reset. I'm going to rename this to Player. Okay? This is what we want to happen. We want to put our animations attached to. As you see, when I created this as well as selected it, we get this to begin animating player, which is the game object. If I went ahead and changed that, the player would swap out. Create an animator and an animation clip. So I'm going to say create. I am now going to, since I'm in my root assets folder, I'm going to say animations. Open that up. And then I want to name it player underscore and the name of the animation. In this case, I'm going to do idle. You can name it whatever you want, but I usually try to know what I'm doing. I could say cat girl or what have you, an idol, but since my game revolves around cat girl, I'm going to be classifying her as the player. So now, as you see, it will create an animator. Okay? We talked about animator in the last one, which is how do you hook up different animations. It's like a controller. So I'm going to open up my idle. I'm going to grab all these images and drag and drop them right here. So here they all are. If I go ahead and focus in on it, you will see nothing up here. It's like, why is that? I'm going to go ahead and just switch to 2D for right now. You got to click preview. Now, if you click over here on your sprite and you don't see anything right here, you should be able to at least see the image. More than likely, you double-clicked by accident this little bar. So you have to click and hold and pull this bar up if you want to see it. So therefore, you can cycle through all of these. But sometimes it's really easy to click there by accident and it closes the bar. So if you don't see something when you click on a graphic, make sure you open it up so you can confirm that this is the right one you're doing. So as you see here, we got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. We got 8 frames of animation. And if you see here, if you count these little dots here, because it automatically created the keyframes for us without even having to hit record, we got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. So we are good. Now, if I click on preview, it will show me that graphic of the cat thief girl. So now, if I want to see the actual sprites in the animation, we can click this little symbol over here, which will actually show us the graphics. So we can actually see what graphics we put in there. And there they all are. So once again, we can hit spacebar, and you see that's playing really fast. If I hit spacebar again, that stops it. I can reset it, click play here, and the same thing. Well, that's a little fast. That's why, because we are running our samples at 60 frames per second. Well, we have to figure out how many frames of animation we wish to display using our 8 frames. I'm just going to go with 15 for this moment, and then hit play again. I guess after I hit enter. That still seems a little fast. So let's drop it down to 10. That may be kind of fast too. Let's just say 5 and see what happens. No. If we say 8, that's not too terribly bad. Usually 12 has been my standard go-to, but we'll say 8 this time. Okay, so once again, I can pull this apart, and there's all my different frames. Now, since I created my first animation, I can go ahead and add the other parts of the animation too by clicking this little drop-down where it says Player Idle and say Create New Clip. I'm already going to be defaulted into the Animations folder. I will click that. I will click on Idle, and I will name it Run. So now I'll go back here. I'll change this to 8. I will close my idle. I will open up Run, drag and drop these right here. So then I will play. That looks pretty good. Okay? And I want to go ahead and add, let's just say my jump. So click here. Jump. Grab the 8 or grab the 6. Change this back down to 8. Click preview. Not too terribly bad. Okay. So what we have done is we have taken the individual sprites that were already created for us and put them into a sprite renderer that's going to get played. Let's go ahead and, while we're here, right click, create folder. I'm going to create a textures directory. I'm also going to say File, Save As, go to my scene, and call this Main. Okay, so we have this wonderful girl just sitting there floating in space, and if I hit play, she'll be an idle. well, wait a minute, we didn't hook up anything. How did she get into idle? Because when we created her, she got created with a animator, and when we created the animation clips, it went ahead and created the animator controller. If I double click on this, it will bring this up. And as you see, this animator controller has the three animation clips we've already created. So entry. Entry by default is how it starts off with. And then the first one that's orange is going to be default. I can change it to run, for example, by right-clicking, saying set layer as default state. So if I were to move this down, whoops, I'll leave it up there, and I was able to hit play, you will see she's in her run animation. If I go to player jump, right-click, say set as default layer, that's her jump. Okay, so as I mentioned before, you want to start with what people are going to be seeing when it first starts. So in this case, it's going to be the player idle. Okay, well, now we need to transition from one state to the next. So the animator controller is essentially a state machine. I want to right-click here and say make a transition to go to player run. As well as I want to click on player run by left-clicking, right-click, say make transition, and come back. Okay? Well, if I were to play this, you will see she starts off in idle, and then she goes to run. If I click on the player, it's going to show me this plays once, and then this gets fired, and then it comes back, so it goes in a loop. Well, that's because we need to have conditions. We need to have conditions that specify when do we actually move, when do we actually transition from this idle to this player run. In that case, we're going to use parameters. We're going to click over here in parameters, we're going to click plus, and we're going to do float. The first one we want to do is speed. Okay, that is going to be the speed of our player. Based upon the speed of our player, we can actually specify whether we want to. In this cat girl, we have sprites for run and walk. So if I really wanted to, I can specify a speed such as 0.1 to 1 is walk. 1.1, anything greater than 1.0 would be run. But for this demonstration, we're just going to stick with the player run. So now I'm going to click on the transition from the idle to the player run, and I'm going to choose this condition check over here to add to list. I'm going to say speed is greater than 0.01. These are arbitrary numbers that I'm making up as I go along right now. Okay? We just know if you're idle, you're probably not moving. So we know the value is not 0. Also, we want to come back from the player run back to idle when it goes into the opposite condition. So when the speed is less than 0.01. I can test this out by hitting play, and I will see my girl here in idle, and you will see that it keeps doing that. And if I change my speed to 1, she'll transform to run. And until I change this back to 0, she will not go back to idle. But I want you to pay attention to something. See how this bar is moving? This is kind of looping, but when it gets to the end here, it's going to then go back to player idle. So I'm going to try and click 0 when this bar starts. Watch what happens. Okay? What happened is the bar needed to finish before it went to player idle. That has to do with something called exit time. So with exit time, the animation needs to basically be complete before it does this condition checking to move over to another state. Well, sometimes when you let go of the keyboard of moving, that you don't want the character to keep moving for a little bit. You want it to stop immediately. So we would want to make sure we go to idle, our transition, and uncheck exit time. Also open up your settings and change your transition duration to 0. Okay, that will give us our instant ability to change. And we also need to do that on the return. So we're going to remove exit time and set the transition duration to 0. Okay. What this is for blending between the two, so you can smoothly blend. But since we're doing 2D, we're not going to worry about that. Okay, so now we have a player idle and a player run, and I can put values in right here, and we can see what's going on. Well, we have this player jump. We could do condition checks from here. Hey, check to see if the player needs to jump along with here, but I guarantee you that's going to be a mess. So what you want to use is something called any state. So any state is any state that's currently being used. Based upon the condition, you can then go to jump. I want to create a value to let you know that you have trying to jump. You're not trying to idle, you're not trying to run, you're trying to jump. I'm now going to create a bool. I'm going to say is jumping. Okay? So I'm going to right click, say make a transition to player jump. Look at my transition. Make sure the exit time is off. Duration is 0. And I need to put a condition check in here. In this case, I want to add if the is jumping is true. So if I'm doing is jumping to true, it should play the jump animation. We can go ahead and once again test this out by hitting play. So we see idle. If I click the is jumping, okay, it's almost like it got frozen. Well, that's true because by default, the animations are set to can transition to self. So every frame, it is now checking to find out whether it needs to play the transition. And since is jumping is true, it's constantly playing this. Think of this like the update loop, constantly calling the same variable over and over and over again, and it's just basically getting reset all the time. So what we can do is take the can transition to self, turn that off. And now we can hit play, and it will now loop. Okay? Now, when you're jumping, you don't really want to be looping. So one of the things we would want to do, oh, I'm sorry, and the other thing is, let me go back to this. So I'm going to turn that on. So she's jumping, right? I'm going to turn is jumping to false. She's still jumping. Why is she still jumping? Because we haven't told the system to go to anything else. It is now playing this player jump animation clip forever. Why is it playing it forever? Because right now we have our player jump set for loop time. We can turn that off, hit play again, highlight that, click that on, and now she has played the animation, but it's even though it looks like it's looping, it's not. So what we're going to do is we're now going to transition from our player jump to either idle or run. So let's just go ahead and move this over here. Right click, make transition, go to player idle. And we only want to go to player idle when we want to remove exit time. We want to remove our duration. We want to click the plus symbol. If the first off is jumping is false, and we only want to go to idle when the speed is less than 0.01. So speed is less than 0.01. We're going to do the same thing for the run. Right click, make transition, player run, click here, exit, kill duration, condition is jumping is set for false. We're going to add speed is greater than 0.01. So now if I hit play, go back to player, turn this on, she will jump, and she should have transitioned. Why didn't she transition? I must have messed up something. Player jump, transition, player idle. If the jumping is false and the speed is less than 0.01. Nope, we don't want that to happen. That should have fired. His jumping is false. And speed is less than 0.01. Let's just see what happens if we put it to 1. Let's see if it does leave. Just go 1. It's jumping. I think I'm missing something, but we'll find out here in a minute. Okay, so that's animation in a kind of a nutshell, how to get your sprites into a sprite render, which is what this is right here. And you can actually watch this gets updated when it's playing. So you can see it's actually cycling through all the different sprites. Okay, now I want to start making a... We have changed this, but I want to go ahead and start modifying this in code, both the speed and the is jumping. So I'm going to go ahead and create a folder for scripts. We're going to call this player movement. I'm going to open up my Visual Studios. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and attach player movement straight to here. And then here's my Visual Studios. One of the first things I need to do is get a link to the animator. So I can go public, animator, and then I'm going to go animator. Okay? And then in my update, what I'm going to do is I'm going to say if input.get key down, key code dot, we'll just say, what is this, comma? If it's comma, then we want to go ahead and say animator dot set float, and then the name, which we called it speed, and then how much the float value is going to be. In this case, we're going to say 1.0. So we're specifying the amount that you saw in the animator. So let's go back here, letting it compile. And there's animator. So I'm going to go ahead and drag this there, hit play. And by default, it's idling. If I hit the comma key, it goes into its running cycle. So let's stop. Now, we don't want to always go into running cycle. We only want it to happen when it's actually moving. So what we're going to do is we need to have our left and our right. Okay? We can go ahead and change that comma to a period, or we can use something called the horizontal. The horizontal, one second. You can do how to explain getting the input of the arrow keys by default. So what we can do is we can make a public float, and we will call this horizontal move equals 0. Okay, so we can say horizontal move equals input.get raw, get access raw, and we want to get the horizontal, which is already defined in your input parameters, and I'll show you that here in a minute. Now, we also want to multiply this by a value. I'm going to put a magic number of 10 in here for right this moment, but let's go ahead and put a move factor. Public float move factor equals 10. I heard dinging noise. Okay. So what that's going to do is that's going to give you our horizontal move. Go ahead and I debug.log this out. I'm going to get one of two values. Okay, I'm going to hit play. go to Window, General, Console, and you can see constantly that it's horizontal move. I'm going to hit the right arrow. That's a 10. I let go, it goes to 0. I hold the left arrow, and it goes negative 10. That's because I did it by a factor of 10. So what I can do is I can say, hey, if the horizontal move is greater than 0, then I want my speed to be 1. If the horizontal move, just copy this, is less than 0, we also want the speed to be number 1. We can go ahead and ditch this. So the purpose of this is, well, why are we doing kind of the same thing? One of the things we're going to want to do is we're going to be wanting to change our character's direction based upon which arrow they're selecting. So here, if I hit the right arrow, she's running. If I hit the left arrow, she's also running. But you see there's nothing happening. She's not going back to idle when it's 0. So let's go ahead and fix that. So what we can do is have this speed as a variable. In this case, float speed equals 0. And we change our speed to 0, let's see, to 1, 1. And then we can say speed equals 1. Okay? So if we don't hit any of the keys, our speed will be 0. And if we're setting our speed to 0 based upon the conditions in the animator controller, she should be idling. She's idling. I right arrow. I left arrow. Okay, so how do we flip her? Okay, well, if you see, we have her running in her idle, and we have our player right here. If you look over here, we have our transform component, a position, rotation, and scale. It just so happens you can change one of these values to a negative. So let's just start by Z. If I go -1, what happens? Nothing. So that's probably not it. So if I go -1 here, no, unless we want her running on the ceiling, probably not what we want to do. If I go -1 here, that seems like what we want to do. So if we do our left arrow, we want to make sure our scale of our transform is -1, and if she's going to the right arrow, we'll make the scale of 1. And it's basically you're flipping the actual transform. So in this case, we can say transform dot local scale equals new vector 3 for this would be 1, 1, 1, and then this would be -1. We can also do a multiplication to it to get it to -1. But this is very, very, very simple math. So here, if I right, she's running. If I pull my left, she's running. Not too terribly bad. The other one that we did for the animator was the is jumping. Well, that's going to be a little odd because if we want to jump, we can specify we can set the bool, but then we have the speed to worry about too. So let's just go ahead and do that. So we're going to say if input dot get key down, and we're going to say essentially key code dot space, which is the space bar. Okay, we're going to want to do our animator dot set bool, and then the same name. To confirm the name, I'm just going to go double click here, highlight that, come back to our code, paste, and we're going to have to give it a property. In this case, it's going to be true. But you'll see already a problem here. We can set it to true, but we're not setting it to false. Okay? So I can set it to true. Spacebar. There she goes. Okay. So we need to set this to false. We can do this by doing a couple things. We're going to want to add to our player movement a rigid body, because we want to be adding force, and to use force you need to have a rigid body. So on our player, we're going to say rigid body 2D, since we're dealing with 2D. I found that the gravity scale between 2 and 3 usually works pretty good for me. Otherwise she flies up too much. The collision detection, usually want to have continuous. But now, with our player movement script, we're going to need to reference our rigid body 2D. So, rigid body 2D. Now we have a reference to it. Okay? The next thing we're going to want to do is have a value that we can look at called a bool, which is jumping. And we want to default to false, because when the game starts up, she should not be jumping. Okay? We're also going to need to have another value for velocity. Okay, in fact, we'll just go ahead and just zero this out. So we'll say vector 3.0. Okay. The last thing we're going to need is, even though we have a rigid body, in order for it to know that we have landed on something solid, we need to have a collider. In this case, with her shape, I'm going to use, instead of a box, I want to be a little bit, she looks more like a circle to me. So with that, I'm going to go ahead and create a public circle collider 2D. Okay, so now with that, let's go ahead and create, we added a rigid body. We're going to let this compile. And we're also going to add a circle collider 2D. Click preview, we can see what it looks like on her. We're going to take the radius, and you can see the green circle getting bigger. I want to put it, let's just go to our idle. Preview that. Let's bring that down just a tad. That looks pretty good. Okay. I'm now going to assign the rigid body to the rigid body 2D and the circle collider 2D. Circle collider 2D. Now we have a lot already in place. The next thing we're going to want to do is we're going to want to add force. Now that we have a reference to our rigid body, we can go into our update, and during the space bar, we can specify that the is jumping is set for true, as well as we will say rigid body.2D add force, and we want to say a new vector 2, and we want to say, 0f, and then we'll, some value, and I'm going to say some value is 400f, and this is how much force is going to be applied to it. So let's go ahead and go back here. Now, when I hit play, you're going to notice something. She's falling. Well, that's because we don't have any ground on her. So next thing we want to do is right-click, 2D object, create a sprite. Okay? And we're going to want to put the sprite with some kind of graphic. It just so happens I went ahead and grabbed a couple graphics earlier. Hold on. I found this thing called Cartoon Terrain. And I'm going to go here, turn this into a sprite, click apply, drag this onto there, and there I got my sprite. If I click play, as you see, I'm defaulting the sprite on her. Well, we don't want to do that. So let's just take our sprite, move it down. Yes, I know I'm running. So we see now even though she fell a little bit, it looks like minus 689. So let's stop that, change this to 0.689, hit play, and she's still falling. Well, why is she still falling? Because we just created a sprite. This is our ground. Okay? But we don't have any collider on it, so we have to go ahead and add a collider. So we're going to say collider on here. Let's just choose a box collider. And as you see, now I have a nice screen here. So now when I hit play, she's landing on it. Okay? And if I come down here, hit jump, she will jump, and she stops. Okay? That's because if you look at player, you click on the animator, it's still set for is jumping. If I turn it off, it's fine. So we need to have a way to reset the is jumping property back to false in order for it to go back. So let's go ahead and go to here. I'm going to stretch this out so it looks ugly. I can, however, set the offset. I don't think that's what I want to do. That's not what I want to do. I need the material for it. I can change it so it tiles. What does that do? That's not what I want. Okay, that's the collider. What am I talking about? Okay, so let's just click play. Now I have something big for her to stand on. So back to our code. We need to have a way. Now we can jump, and we have set it to is jumping true, and we've set in locally that it is jumping to true. Now, there is a function in Unity that fires every time after the physics update is done, and that is called fixed update. So we will call it fixed update. Okay? The first thing we're going to want to do is we're going to want to get a reference to all the colliders that we possibly can overlap with. So we're going to go collider, collider2D, and we're going to make an array because we need a list of them. Colliders, and we're going to say equals, what is it? Physics2D dot, what is it? Overlap, circle, we're going to choose circle all. And I'm going to use this game object's transform.position because the first parameter is a vector 2-point, and then the radius. Well, we have a reference to the circle collider, so we can use that reference. So that radius, we're going to go circle2d.radius, and then we're going to need a mask. We only want specific sprites to be the ground, because sometimes you may want to jump through a ground. So we need to put a layer mask here. So we're going to say layer ground. Okay, we haven't created it yet, so we need to go ahead and create this. And this is going to be a layer mask. So we're going to go up here, public layer mask, and we're going to say layer ground. Okay, that's good. Now we need to do, this should get us a list of all the colliders that this game object is talking with, since we're using this position. Okay, so now I'm going to do a for index equals 0, index is less than colliders.length, since we know what the collider length is, and then we're going to increase the index by 1. We're going to say if not is jumping. Okay, we want to set our animator dot set bool back to what? False. Oops, false. Okay, so when the character collides with something, and if it's not jumping, we're going to set it back to false. I was like, okay, but we still haven't set this to false. So what we do is after it does all this checks, we can say is jumping equals false. When I go back here, and I click play, and I jump, it is not being set back to false. Let's just check our player. Huh. Let's do that twice now. Okay. Obviously, I'm missing something in some code somewhere. Let me check my code. Hold on. We're going to set this to false. And we're going to set this to true. We do our add force, and we set it to jumping, because we are jumping. We didn't get an error, did we? Let's stop spamming the console. Hold on 1 second. We have our link. Oh, I know what it is. We don't have the layer map set up. Aha, okay, my bad. So let's go to layer and go to, because if you see right here on the player movement, we specify our layer ground is nothing. Well, we need to go ahead and add a layer to it. So we're going to go to layers here, and we're going to say ground. I'm going to click ground, and I'm going to choose layer ground. Okay, now we go back to our player, choose the layer ground to ground. Let's see if that works a little better. Okay, I jump and land. I jump and land. I jump and land. Right arrow and left arrow. And I can jump. Okay, now she is actually not moving per se. So I'm just playing the different animations. Okay, if I want to actually have her run around, I would have to add some kind of move player feature. Let me see if I can do that semi-quick. I'm going to do this in an update. We're going to do private void move player, and I need to pass it. I need to pass it the speed. I'm going to do that and then say speed. Yeah, that looks right. Okay, here we want to go. We want to make the target velocity change. So we will do vector 3, and then we'll say velocity. Hang on, player velocity. Player velocity equals new. Since we're dealing with 2D, we're going to vector 2. We're going to say speed times a factor. We're just going to say speed, and then we're going to say our reference to our rigid body, since we're dealing with velocity, our rigid body 2D dot velocity dot y. Yeah. And then we're going to do rigid body dot 2D velocity will equal. We're going to want to do we want to smooth this transition out when it moves from one to the other. Otherwise, she's going to teleport like Nightcrawler from the X-Men. So here we're going to say a vector 3. Yes. Dot. What are my options here? I want some kind of smooth. What do we have here for smooth? Smooth damp. There we go. And we're going to do a rigid body dot 2D dot velocity, and then we're going to go to our player velocity. That's spelled all sorts of wrong. And then I'm going to say we're going to want to ref our velocity that we specified earlier, and then we're going to give it a factor, which is our smooth time. How about 0.07f? Let me fix this. VELOCITY. Okay, so now we have this, but we need to specify. We need to call it. So we'll call it at the end of our update right here. Do we want to do the update? No, I'm actually going to put it at the end of the fixed update. So we want to call move player. And we need to pass it the axis, the raw axis. I think we call that, what do we call that? This is one of the reasons why I put underscores in my variable names, because they all pop up now, so I know what I'm doing. Horizontal move. That looks like what I need to do. Let's just see how well that works. So we're going to hit play. We're going to jump. Oops, I got to give it focus. Jump, and oh. Okay, that's kind of cute. So as you see here, which is not exactly what I wanted, but it's kind of cute. The point is, you look at the rotation right here of our player. On the rotation for the Z, it's rotating. Well, we don't want that to happen, but otherwise it is moving properly. So what we do here is on our rigid body, we'll come down here to our constants, and we'll freeze rotation on the Z. So now when I hit play, now she's running. Now I could make this a child of the camera. Well, I guess the camera a child of her. So now the camera's running with her. Whee! That's actually kind of cool. So let me actually bring this camera back a little bit, get out of 2D mode, come here. This is our camera. So we can see that's kind of where I want it. Now we can play with some of these numbers to find out, what's probably a better height jump. We can go back to here. We can say float jump height equals, I think I said 400 originally. So let's go down here, and where we added the velocity, we'll change that to there. Go back. Click on our player, and you should see 400. Let's just say, I don't know, 700. I do a jump. That's pretty good. How about 900? It might be a little high. I want to jump, but I still want to see the ground. So let's go 750. There we go. So okay, so there's a rudimentary 2D character controller and animation. So it's 8:51. What do we have for questions? Or do we have any questions? If Andrew's still with us.
Andrew had muted himself.
Okay.
So, yeah, we've got some good comments in chat, both on Twitch and on YouTube.
Oh, wow. Okay. It's 2D, people. Go ahead.
Says I gave the stream a share on my channel and Twitter, so thank you very much, Coding with Unity. I personally am interested, maybe for a future one, in seeing how animations interact. For instance, if you've got a fighting 2D game, where how does a punch turn into knocking the other sprite over, that sort of thing.
Right.
So, oh yeah, I'd turned down my gain before I muted myself there, Coding with Unity, so that I wouldn't be being heard while this is going on. We're actually doing a share screen here, so I was still live in the Discord with Dr. Unity, but muted myself into OBS. So yeah, Dr. Unity. So that's one thing I'd like to see is how animations interact with this system, with each other in this system.
Okay, so like one of my favorite games of arcades besides Gauntlet is Ninja Turtles: Turtles in Time. So are you talking like a beat 'em up kind of game like that?
Yeah, something like that.
Sure, I could add on to this and show you how to interact with the enemies and how to do a simple beat 'em up game.
That would be fun. We do have some folks I know in the group who are doing fighting games.
Yeah, that was fun. My daughter's a pixel artist. I think that's what they're called. So, I don't know, she's 7.
Very cool. She can do a better cat girl.
Yes. I mean, hey, this cat girl, it worked for what I needed to work for.
Yeah, very cool. Yeah, and the same would be true with triggering multi-animations. For instance, someone pulls a gun and shoots, and there's recoil and the gun special effect.
Yeah, a lot of that would just be, yes, so that would just be calling an animation, and in the animation you can put an event. I showed that last time, but since people may not have seen the last time, what you can do is here, let's just say, oh, I don't know, I'm going to create a public shooting. Okay, so we're going to say debug.log shoot. Okay, so what I'm going to do here is in my jumping animation, as soon as this compiles, in my jumping animation, when it's done playing the animation at the end here, I'm going to call this one right here, which is add an event. And if I hit the drop down, I can say shooting. So if we watch this right here, I click console, and I hit play, you see this is shoot because, why is it shooting? It's trying to, anyway. It jumps, and when it lands, it should call shoot. That's being called for some other reason. Hold on, let me check something. Oh, I know what it is. My bad. I put it on, my bad. See, even right here, player idle, I put that there. That's why. So let me go ahead and delete that. Boop. Hit the drop down, choose jump at the end of my jump, which is what I said I was going to do, but then I didn't. I'm going to go here, I'm going to say shoot. So in this case, when I'm jumping, it's going to shoot. So I hit play, and I jump, and it plays shoot. So that calls something into scripts, which you can then play whatever special effects, the recoil, the sound, whatever you need to have happen, because you know exactly where that is. In this case, let's just say I want when she's coming down, she makes a oof, and then like a Wilhelm scream when she's falling down. So I can put this here and then fire off some sound based upon that right there. Like play effects, sound effects, special effects, what have you. And that's timed to the animation. Since we are interrupting the animation, it would actually work out really good. So you don't have it constantly playing over and over and over again, because you can interrupt it, which is why we have the duration set for 0. What other question we have?
I think that's it for questions. I've also asked for comments as to what people want us to discuss next. Next week, we're doing a discussion on mobile game design. We're trying to actually give Dr. Unity a night off, a Tuesday off, though I might still trick him into being part of it because it is mobile game design. But
yeah, I do that.
If folks have suggestions for other speakers, some of the folks we normally get, like Robert Wahler, he's launching an Xbox version of Thinker, so he's pretty slammed. But if there are other suggestions for mobile game devs, let us know. And I think that's all the questions. Let me do one more look over in Twitch. Yeah, that looks like all the questions we have. So much appreciated, Dr. Unity.
Sure, we'll work on a beat-em-up game next.
Excellent, excellent. Okay, and that'll probably be not the 14th, but the 21st. So join us on the 14th to talk about mobile game design.
Okay, I could probably do that too.
All right, thank you, everybody. We definitely appreciate you having been with us, and look forward to joining you next time right here on The Muppet Show, or whatever we happen to be.
It's The Muppet Show! Yep.
Take care, Kermie.
Okay, bye-bye.